Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Torah L'Chaim with your host, Rabbi Anibal. So excited to be here with all of you in this virtual classroom studying this week's Parsha. So welcome. Welcome. Paul and Julie are here. Great to see your names in the chat, guys. Judy Sharak is here as well. Good afternoon to you, Judy. Welcome, everyone. It's an amazing parshiot that we are reading at the beginning of the book of Exodus. We are going to read about slavery, but also about freedom. Slavery, but also about freedom. Shelly Chochinov is here. Good afternoon, Shelly. Welcome to Torah L'Chaim. And I'm going to give a few more minutes for some more students to show up. This is usually the way it happens. I already have all my notes and my slides ready to go to study this week's Parsha. By the way, while we give a couple more minutes before we start the class, remember if you are hoping to come to our services at Shaarei Zedek, if you are hoping to come in person, just remember that all the Shabbat services during the month of February are going to be at the Asper campus. So far until the end of January, no problem. Everything is at Temple Shalom, okay? But then comes February. Remember that Kabbalat Shabbat and Saturday mornings are going to be at the Asper campus. Only those two services. There is always a confusion about the end of Shabbat, right? The Shabbat afternoon and then the Havdalah. Those are back to Temple Shalom. Only Kabbalat Shabbat and Shabbat morning during February Asper campus at the Bernie Theater. Hello, David and Brenda Grossman. Welcome to the class. Thank you for saying hello. And we are going to wait a couple more minutes before we start with this wonderful Parsha that is called Vaera. And this is, we are going to study a little bit about the way God revealed himself to Abraham and the words that God used. They're very interesting, and he's teaching us a lot about the essence of God. But in this parsha also, and it's not part of today's class, right? It's not part of today's class, but you should know that it's happening. In this parsha, we are going to read the 4 verbs of deliverance. These are prominent during the Passover Seder. There are 4 verbs. And I can't remember now for the top of my head these 4 verbs. But and I will take you, and I will bring you, all that. There are 4 verbs. That's why we have 4 cups of wine and 4 questions and 4 everything. It's coming from this week's Parsha and the way God promised Moses about freedom. Okay? So it's a good thing. It's a good thing. Okay, we should start with today's class. Let's see the way God reveals himself to Moses. Okay, let's go. Okay, here we have the first verse that I want to share with you, and this is the very beginning of the parsha, by the way. Very beginning of the parsha. And it said, Karen Farkas, welcome to the class. He said, God spoke to Moses, okay? And he said to him, so God said to Moses, I am Adonai. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as El Shaddai, although I did not make myself known to them by the name Adonai, or Yud Hey Vav Hey. So, hello, CJ. Welcome to the class. So what happened here is, and we have to understand a few things. And this will be good information for all of you whenever you want to read the Bible, okay? Especially when you read it in Hebrew. You probably heard the name Adonai being used a lot during the Torah readings. For example, Vaera Adonai, el Moshe Leimor, one of the most common phrases of the Bible, okay? The fact that we use the name Adonai is because we don't really know how to pronounce the special name of God mentioned in the Bible. When I say the special name, I'm talking about the 4 letters name. 4 Hebrew letters. Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. Let me say it again. Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. If you see it here, I will edit my. There you have it in Hebrew on my slide, right? Even if you don't read Hebrew, you can probably see that there are 4 letters plus the 2 dots at the end. The 2 dots at the end, that's not part of the Hebrew, that's the end of the verse. Okay? So, because we don't know how to pronounce that name anymore, used to be the only time that name used to be pronounced in the right way was by the high priest once a year, during the Yom Kippur. And everybody was yelling, was shouting, so there was no recollection of what was the right pronunciation. And because the Hebrew in the Bible doesn't have vowels, so we don't really know. And we don't want to mess up, we don't want to make a mistake. So what we do is every time that we read in the Torah those 4 letters, we are going to be using another of the names of God that the Torah mentions. So at least we know that we are pronouncing it properly. So you will see that even the vowels that they are within those 4 letters are the vowels to remind us that whenever we are reading Yud Hey Vav Hey, we say Adonai. Okay? Now, this was the beginning of a big confusion, because when the Torah was translated, whoever translated the Torah decided to keep the phonetics of that word with the vowels of Adonai. So basically, if you have Yud Hey Vav Hey, you see, as I have it here, I will show you what happened. The letters that the rabbis added were, the vowels were a little E, then they added a little O, and they added a little A. How does it read? Yehovah or Jehovah. Have you ever read that name? We have in these days a religion, the Jehovah Witnesses. Well, the thing is, the name of God, Jehovah, doesn't really exist. It's a mixed up between 2 different concepts. One is the written name, and the other one is the vowels that they were added, so the Hebrew reader will be aware that he or she needs to use a different name of God, that is Adonai. Okay? I wanted to make you aware of this because it's interesting how this was taken out of context so many times, and many people still refer to God as Jehovah, which is not a thing, at least not in Hebrew. Okay? When we read the Torah, we say Adonai, and the original pronunciation is unknown. It may have been Yahweh or something. There are some theories, but it's not Jehovah at all. Okay, so going back to the text, God spoke to Moses and said to him, I am Adonai. Okay? So in the same verse, we have 2 different ways to refer to the name of God. At the beginning it said, God spoke. In the Hebrew is Vayedaber Elohim. Elohim is one of the names of God. Vayedaber Elohim el Moshe. Vayomer elav ani Adonai. So it's almost like Moses knew about the name Elohim, but now God is saying to Moses, the name of Elohim is Adonai. This is my name. Okay? It's interesting because we are going to discover in the Torah that God is referred to with multiple different names. And the rabbis say that it's not that we are talking about different gods, it's an easier way to understand different layers or different manifestations of God. So it's more convenient for us in specific situations to use specific name that it will help us focus into one single aspect of God. Of course, without forgetting that God is infinite, but for practical practical terms, it's easier sometimes to use a name that it will define God in a specific way. If you have any comments about this, I would like to hear it in the chat, okay? Because this is a very interesting thing, very interesting. So, for example, in the same verse, Elohim and Adonai, and immediately after, the Torah said, and there is one more name, and it's the name that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob know me, says God, and that was El Shaddai. Okay, and the verse says that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob knew God as El Shaddai and did not know God as Adonai. You follow me? So it's almost like God said to Moses, Moses, you are the first one to learn this about me, says God. Okay. Hello, I'm Paro Goldman. Welcome to the class. So this is fascinating because if you go back and read the Torah in the book of Genesis, God did appear to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as Adonai. So how can the book of Exodus says that they didn't know the name Adonai? Let's try to understand this dilemma that we have when we read this verse. So, Rabbi Yaakov Menken is going to help us understand what's going on here. So the four letters name of God, Yahweh or Yud Hey Vav Hey, appears many times throughout the book of Genesis. That's what I just told you, right? So the name of Adonai appears many times. Rashi explains the verse that not say Lo Hodati, I did not tell them, but rather Lo Nodati, I was not known to them. Obviously, our forefathers knew God's name. But as Rashi continues, they were never given the opportunity to recognize God's full nature. In what regard, they could not see how reliable and truthful God is, because they never saw God fulfill the promises God made to them concerning the promises that God made to them concerning their descendants. So, let me explain what's going on here if you haven't understood. Okay? So, in other words, it's not that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob didn't know the name Adonai. What they didn't know is the full extent of what that name means. Because what we are going to learn here is that every time God is using a different name in the Torah, is going to imply a different aspect. Something different is going to happen. So, it seems to imply here, for the words of Rashi, that the word Adonai, the name Adonai, is a name that is representing truth, and is representing the fulfilled promises. Shelly Chachinov, you said the different names, the various aspects of God. Yes, correct. Clyde, you said, do you have an idea when the Nekudot added to God's name? Yes and no. But I mean, that was when the Torah was codified. I had to search it. When exactly was that it was standardized by the rabbis. It's called a specific age of rabbinic development that is called the Masoretic times, when the rabbis actually decided everything about the Torah. They decided the end of the verses, the end of the chapters, right? And all details like that, including the Nekudot. Oh, by the way, this is very interesting, because when the rabbi had to do that, theory, the legend goes that they needed to collaborate with Karaite Jews. And that the Karaites are the ones who rejected the Talmud. Okay, they considered themselves Jewish. For some rabbis, they are Jewish. For some others, they are not. But what happened is the Karaites, they rely only on Torah to know what to do as a Jew. They don't have the Talmud. They don't have oral law. So their level of knowledge of Torah was undiluted. Because the rabbis have to split their time into studying Torah and studying Talmud, the level of expertise of every single detail of the written Torah could never be compared to some other person that all they do is to study the written Torah. So back then, they collaborated to try to figure out all these details in the Torah. All these details. So, and by the way, my understanding is the Karaites, they do argue that they know how to pronounce the four letters of God, which is, I will let you to do your own research if you wanna see. But they believe they don't use Adonai when they pray. They use different names. Okay, but we rabbinic Jews, we use the name Adonai. So let's try to better understand the names used in this parsha. Okay, the Ibn Ezra and the Rambam maintain that El Shaddai refers to the powerful God of creation and nature who revealed himself to the patriarchs without changing the natural order of the universe. Yahweh, or Adonai, changed the natural order of the universe in the plagues and the splitting of the Red Sea in order to free the Israelites from Egyptians' servitude. So what we have here is El Shaddai, or Elohim. Can you feel that it's the same root, El? The names of God that involve the El are referring to a God of nature. So every time the Torah uses that name, it's not referring to a personal God. It's referring to a universal God. The name Adonai is referring to a personal God. In the sense that, for example, here, the name Adonai is used with this personal God that is personally overseeing everything that happens to Moses and to the Jewish people. You see, but it's not that they are two different gods, they are two different perceptions of God. We believe that God is in control of nature in general. Also, almost like a God is in charge of keeping nature natural, if that makes sense. Right? We take it for granted, but the belief is God is keeping nature natural every day. But at the same time, we believe that God is not just like someone or something keeping nature, but also someone that is close to us. Elohim, it's the feeling is something that is detached and far. Adonai is something that is very close to us. And those are two different aspects of God, but they are two sides of the same coin. Any questions about that? I would like to know, because this is and I think at one point in our lives, we all experience the two different aspects of God. Sometimes we feel that God, if there is a God, is just in nature. And sometimes we feel that we need to develop a relationship with God. Well, one is Elohim, and the other one is Adonai. But that's the way we refer to God. Let's continue with this. The God of Genesis is El Shaddai, the almighty power and the sum total of all the powers of the universe, the Elohim. God created the cosmos before there was any human beings on earth. God effectuated the Big Bang. God sets limits to every earthly creation, and God did it all by himself. God is the God who revealed himself to Abraham and his family and establish with them a covenant and mission to perfect the world. The God of Exodus is Adonai. Literally, he will effectuate and bring about redemption in history through the partnership of Israel and the nations of the world. El Shaddai is the God of creation and being. Adonai is the God of history and becoming. Center stage in Genesis is God alone. Center stage in Exodus is God and Israel as we march the long, torturous, but guaranteed march of redemption. Yeah. Karen Farkas, this is a difficult concept for me. It's a difficult concept, I believe, to all of us, because I think we are struggling with this duality of God all the time. And I would like to know which model of God is closer to you. And that's what it is. Sometimes we feel that God is one way or another, and it's difficult for us to understand that God is both. God is both, far and close at the same time. That's the thing. Shelley Chochinov, I know you like Martin Buber. Martin Buber addresses this duality in his I and thou. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. But you should know that there are many different names of God mentioned or within Jewish tradition, right? Let me think a few of them that we use. We use, for example, sometimes Hamakom, which translates as thou place. And that's the name we use when we bring comfort to mourners. Hamakom yenachem etchem. May God comfort you. But the word we use is Hamakom. We also use Harachaman, the one full of mercy. We also use Hashem sometimes, the name, when we don't want to use the name, the official names of God, if you may. Because these names, El Shaddai, Elohim, and Adonai, are what we call the official names of God, and they have different levels of sanctity that, for example, saying Hashem, the name, that is something that the rabbis use when they don't want to use the name of God. Clyde, you say, so these two aspects of the same entity, correct? Yes, correct. It's correct, but it's almost like saying that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob couldn't understand certain aspects of God. They couldn't understand the God that is personally overseeing the history of Israel. Why? The rabbis will explain here, as I read before, because they never saw the promises fulfilled. So they never understood that aspect of God. But Moses now have the opportunity to continue the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as the one who is witnessing the fulfilling of the prophecies. Because God said to Abraham, yeah, your descendants are going to be slaves. But even Jacob died before that happened. Yeah, he was in Egypt, but he wasn't a slave. But eventually Moses is the one who experienced slavery and redemption. Okay? Now, let's continue. Now, okay, Moses understood something else about God, and he had a mission. Moses had a mission. He will be the deliverer. Now, God said to Moses, go talk to the people of Israel. Share with them the good news. They are going to be free. I'm going to take them out of the land of Egypt. I'm going to take them to the promised land. Go tell them. Moses wasn't excited about that. Not at all. The point, Moses said, so Moses went to share this wonderful news with the people of Israel. But they wouldn't listen to him because they were so discouraged. And their slavery was so cruel. You know what is interesting here? And Hi, Holly. It said, it seems that it could not have been a God of Exodus without the God of Genesis. Yeah, it's almost like that is also the way we experience God. That sometimes it's easier to understand a general God, a God that is in charge of nature, and then we can actually start working towards developing a relationship with a personal God. And the same happened here in the Torah. We see the same thing. And now coming to this verse, to verse 9. What I like about this verse, and I mean I feel bad for them, is that Moses came with this message of hope. Moses came to give them the good news that they were going to be free. They were going to go to the promised land, but they didn't listen. And it doesn't say that they didn't listen because they didn't want to listen. It says that they wouldn't listen to him because they were so discouraged and their slavery was so cruel. This is something I believe and I think we can all relate to. That when we feel discouraged and when we feel overwhelmed for things that are happening in our lives, it's very difficult for us to listen to uplifting words of hope, words of blessing. It's like if we give in to discouragement, we create a wall around us. We create a wall around us, and we don't allow anything good to come into our lives. We get so focused into everything that is wrong that is very difficult, if not impossible sometimes, to see good things around us. And this is exactly what it says here. It's not that it says that they didn't want to listen to Moses because they were bad people. Not at all. They were good people. It's just that they were so beaten up that they couldn't listen. And it's a reality. And Moses, the great Moses, he didn't know what to do. He was speechless. He couldn't find another way to let them know. And it happens to us as well sometimes when we reach out to somebody who is going through a difficult time and we feel that we cannot find the right words to say. Because have you ever been there? That doesn't matter what you say or how you say it, you know that it's not taken. It's not taken. So I want to know what you feel about that, and if you ever have that situation. Maybe that was you, and I think we all been there at one point. Now, the Rambam said this is exactly like this. It said, it says, because they were so discouraged and their slavery was so cruel, not because they didn't believe in God and God's prophecy, but they just couldn't pay attention to God's words because of the pressure from the hard work. Yeah. Now, the thing is that sometimes we can break this cycle of discouragement by rationalizing things in life. Like this, sometimes I feel that I feel bad, I feel discouraged, people will talk to me, I won't listen, but if I push myself to read or to study, or I read things like this and I recognize, this is the way our psychology works. So when we can recognize it, we are one step closer to being able to change it. It's and the same thing happened many times in the history of the Jewish people, where they keep failing, but sometimes they failed because they were discouraged and they couldn't see the good around them. So it's good. We are all studying about this together, and if you're ever being in that situation, I hope this is helping you to understand that the cycle of discouragement can be broken, but we have to be aware that that's the way it works, so we can do something about it. Now, let me read this text for you. Shelley Chochinov said, when the heart is heavy, the ears and mind are closed. That's correct. That's correct. And sometimes it's something that we have to be aware as well. Not get mad at people when we try to help them and encourage them, and they are so, ungrateful. No, they're going through a lot. They're going through a lot. It's not their fault. Continue. It is difficult for us to recognize that hand of God in painful events. Rabbi Zev Leff points out, this is a result of our own limited perspective. The Talmud asks, how can the prophet write, and this is the prophet Zechariah, okay? How can the prophet write, on that day God will be one and his name one? You know what it is? This is from the Aleinu. We sing it every day in our prayers. It's coming from the book of Zechariah. On that day, it's talking about the days of the redemption of the world. On that day, God will be one and his name one. Our God and his name not one right now? The answer is that in reality, everything that God does is good. But in our current circumstances, we are unable to recognize this. We can't. It's impossible. We distinguish between the blessing, Hatov ve'hameitiv, who is good and does good, that we say upon receiving good news, versus the blessing that we say upon bad news, Dayan Haemet, the true judge. In the world to come, that means when we die and we go to the other world. In the world to come and in the Messianic era, we will recognize that these are one and the same. So basically the two blessings, the blessing for the good and the blessing for the bad. What it says that after we leave this world, we are going to understand that they are both one and the same. Okay? We will see God's mercy in every event. Today, we do not pronounce the four-letter name of God, which indicates his transcendence of time and his mercy. Then we will. Now, this is very interesting that the rabbis understand that naturally for us to see the good in everything, it's impossible. It's impossible. And it's easy to say, oh yeah, there is something good in everything that is happening to you. And the answer is usually, that means you have no idea what I'm going through. Right? So that's why the rabbi said, and that's true. That's right. It is impossible. It is impossible for us to see the good in everything. That's why when we can, if we reach a point when we can see the good in everything, that means that we have perfect faith. And the rabbi said that is a gift from God. It's not something that is naturally within ourselves. If we ever reach to that point, it's because God gave us that as a gift. And I'm going to use a word that sometimes doesn't sound Jewish, but it's absolutely Jewish. And that is an act of grace from God. Yeah, and I had this conversation with many people, and they feel that the word grace is not a Jewish word. It's something that you hear in a church, not in a synagogue. The word grace of God, or amazing grace, or all that. Is that Jewish? Yes, it is. What do you think it is? The Hebrew word for grace is chen in Hebrew. You know, we say it, chen v'chesed v'rachamim. Chen is grace. Grace is something that God gives us as a gift. Not because we deserve it sometimes, which is something that comes from God. And the ability to see the blessing on everything, or the good on everything before we leave this world, it comes from God as an act of grace. So, for example, it's very common among Hasidic Jews to pray to God for the gift of faith. That's it. That's it. All you need at the end of the day is to receive the gift from God to be able to see the good on everything. Sometimes I try to imagine my life where I can actually see and understand the good on everything that happens to me. And I think on my level personally, on a level that I can see that everything comes from God, but sometimes I struggle to actually be able to see the good on everything that happens to me. That's the thing. Let me read a few comments here. CJ, you say to look at things, even seemingly bad thing, as happening for us rather to us. Yeah, that's a thing, but sometimes it's difficult even to something that we say, things don't happen to us, but for us. But we say it, but we still don't feel it. We cannot see it. Right? Shelly, you said Chen versus Chesed. Yeah, they are two different things. Chen is grace. Chesed is kindness. They are not the same thing. CJ, for instance, Joseph being put into a pit and sold into slavery. That's usually it's usually used as an example, the life of Joseph, and how at the end, when he reencountered his brothers, he said to his brothers, "Oh, don't worry, because you tried to harm me, but it was all for good. It was all for the very best." And it's almost like Joseph eventually received this gift from God to understand that. Because how in this world will you be able to see something like that, to connect the dots? Because that's what Joseph did. He connected the dots of his life to understand. But it doesn't mean that back then, when he was in the midst of suffering, that at that point he understood that. It's later on in life that he realized that. So sometimes we go through difficult situations and we suffer. We suffer today. It doesn't mean that we may not understand it in the future, but right now, I'm in the middle of a storm. And that's what happened with the Israelites when Moses came to talk to them. Maybe in the, fast forward, when they received the Torah, they understood everything, right? All the suffering that they have in Egypt. But right then, they were slaves. They still had the scars fresh on their backs, so they couldn't listen to Moses. I had to suffer with this whip every day, and you come to talk to me about the goodness of God. What is the goodness on everything that I'm going through? Sometimes that's life. That we don't know. We cannot see where is the good in things that happen to us, right? And that's the natural thing. Unless we pray to have the faith to see that everything is good. Yeah, Clyde, you say, for example, the Holocaust. What is the good in the Holocaust? You tell me. Where is it? We can't see it. Sometimes it's impossible. And we shouldn't push it. Because if one day we may learn to find spiritual peace about the Holocaust, trust me, it's going to come as a gift from God, not as a natural thing that happened within us. And I believe, like any other suffering that we have, the comfort comes as a gift from God. Now, let me present to you a story here. I love the Hafetz Chaim. If you ever have the opportunity, he wrote a beautiful book about the rules of Lashon Hara, of slander. A whole book about what is considered slander, how to control slander, how to recognize slander, and what to do. Beautiful, wonderful book, the Chafetz Chaim. Okay, it's widely available. Now, the Chafetz Chaim, Rabbi Israel Meir Kagan, was once sitting with his family and friends, and he spoke about the terrible situation in the Jewish community of his day in Europe, pogroms. You can imagine how it was, right? People had truly lost their faith in God and were moving away from religion. Rev Naftali was the Rosh Mesivta high school principal in the yeshiva in Radin, and he was one of those listening. He responded, "Why is this a great surprise? Even in Egypt, when the Jews still remembered their forefathers and also knew that the exile would only last 400 years, they were nonetheless so disheartened by the sheer amount of work placed upon them that they lost hope. In our current situation, our forefathers are long forgotten, and our exile is apparently endless. Why should we be surprised then if we see people losing their faith?" The Chafetz Chaim considered this and realized he was right. "You're a good defender for Israel," he said. "Your words should ascend before the holy throne." So in other words, what these rabbis are talking about here, and what the Chafetz Chaim finally realized, is that people losing faith because they went through a traumatic situation, okay, is human nature. That is human nature. Said, what can you expect from a human being right now? Look back in Egypt, what the Torah is saying. These people that they were still under the influence of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? They probably the father or grandfather, they met Jacob, and they're still already losing faith. So what can we expect? The only difference that we have, or the only advantage that we have that they don't have, is this is something, by the way, that Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, one famous rabbi from the 20th century in the United States, what he was saying is our advantage is the writings of the rabbis. They didn't have it back then. They didn't have things to study to strengthen their faith. They didn't have anything to uplift them, to inspire, to educate them in the path of the faith, or how to strengthen the relationship with God. They have the experience, but they didn't have anything to keep the flame alive. So that's why I always say that it's very important for us to never stop studying, because Jewish study has the power to uplift our lives. Whenever we need words of encouragement, what is that going to come? If you don't have anybody around you, just go and get inspired. Give yourself the opportunity to get inspired by stories like this. You go and read, and you understand, you feel your life reflected on what you read, and you feel all of a sudden a spark of hope and a spark of connection with God. CJ, you say 58 at 100 years on earth is minuscule relative to the age of our souls. The overall picture, it's impossible for us humans to see. Of course, that everything that is in the spiritual realm is impossible for us to imagine. And the rabbis say that it's impossible. How can you expect that a finite being can comprehend even a little bit of the infinite? That's the thing. Shirley Chochin, if they lived it, we have the rabbi's commentary. Yeah, but Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, he will say that having the rabbi's commentaries, the Talmud, the books, is a huge advantage. Huge advantage. And the fact that we study, and we can have access of all the stories, he said that is superior to the actual experiences that they had back then. I don't know if you ever consider your life like that. Yes, you were not part of the revelation on Sinai. You didn't experience it. You didn't see it. You didn't hear it. But you can read about it, and then you're not only reading about the episode, but only about how that can inspire your life. That came after when Rabbi started to write about it, how that experience can uplift you. So that's why we should, as Jews, get familiar with all this text. It's a fascinating concept. Fascinating concept, you see. And let's continue. Now, Moses is arguing with God, and Moses is continuing the logic of this in a very interesting way. Moses now said to God, because first God said to Moses, go talk to the people of Israel. And he went. They didn't listen. They didn't listen. Of course not. We explain why. We understand why. We should never criticize them, okay? We should never criticize them, because we've been there, done that. But now Moses continues it, and now said, listen, God, you sent me to talk to the people of Israel. They didn't listen. And now you're sending me to talk to Pharaoh? Why wouldn't he listen to me? He doesn't even know who Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were. So it's crazy, right? So Moses says to God, behold, the children of Israel had not listened to me. So how will Pharaoh listen to me? And he added, and I have sealed lips. Okay? By the way, sealed lips, the literal translation, arel sephatayim, means uncircumcised lips. Which is maybe for another class to try to understand why that word, arel sephatayim. Okay? CJ, you say, irony today, with so many signs of wonder, good and Hashem, in Israel, many have become non-believers, atheists, and agnostics. Well, because CJ, I commend you for being able to see the good. I commend you for being able to say the good. That is not easy. Many people prefer to see only the bad, and that is what they make them take that stance on their theological beliefs. It's like this. So I'm happy that you can see the good, and that inspires you to discover God. But it's not everybody that can be there. And again, I truly believe that we should always pray to God for the gift of faith, as an act of grace from God, to give us faith to see the good in everything. Otherwise, we will by ourselves, no chance. Okay, so why would Moses think this way? Okay, Rashi explains. This is one of the 10 Kal Vachomer, a fortiori, present in the Torah. So he said, again, Kal Vachomer, I explained this once in a while, right, in this class. Kal Vachomer is a fortiori, which means if a weightlifter cannot lift the stone, surely a child cannot. That makes sense to you? Okay? If a bodybuilder cannot lift it, will a child be able to lift it? No. So when you are in that kind of logical situation, that principle is called Kal Vachomer. Okay? So Rashi said this is one of the Kal Vachomer situations in the Torah. Okay? Why? Because Moses said Kal Vachomer. He says, if the Israelites didn't listen, Kal Vachomer, even more so, Pharaoh won't listen. Okay, but this logic, and now I'm reading the yellow here, right? This logic is questionable. The Torah says that the reason the Israelites did not listen to Moses was because they were so discouraged and their slavery was so cruel. Inasmuch as Pharaoh was not a victim of such oppression, perhaps he might listen. Don't you think so? Do you agree that maybe Moses' logic is flawed, right? That they are two. It's like what's the expression in English? Apple and oranges. That's what it is. Apple and oranges. They're two different things, right? Two different things. So let's try to explain Moses' argument. Okay, Moses knew that Jews inherently believe. However, the suffering of hard work and the evil treatment of Egyptian masters tainted their faith. You see? Hardship taints our faith. Never forget that. But hard work alone does not taint faith. This is only when it is exasperated by the torment of the taskmaster and the cruel taunts. How much more so, he figured, will Pharaoh be inattentive of the command that Hashem is in charge and the Jews should be let free? If hard work stains the thought process, blocking the beauty of Hashem's word to filter through, how much more so does the idolatry and heresy of Pharaoh impede them from penetrating? So what Moses is talking about here is that his logic is it's related to our capacity to block our connection with God. So with Moses logic is, if hard work and tragedy is blocking our connection with God, even more so, living a life of idolatry and heresy, where you voluntarily sever your connection with God. And he says, you see, the Israelites had that connection severed because of external circumstances. Pharaoh had it severed because he wanted to do it. So, let's continue. We look at Hashem's creation. We go to synagogue. We hear Musar. You know what Musar is? We hear words of ethics and morals. We read the prophets, but somehow it does not get through. The words are beautiful. Those who hear them can be inspired, but so many impediments block our vision and our hearing, our lifestyles, our desire, even our work. If we open our eyes, we will see so much holiness, which is beautiful. But Pharaoh purposely refused to do that. Why? Because he thought he was God. So how can you receive something from God if you think you are God? Right? That's the thing here. That's the thing here. And let's see. I have another text for you because I just see that we are approaching the end of the class. And CJ, you said freedom of religion alone, considering worldwide history, is miraculous. Well, you see, we understand in Judaism that the freedom of religion it's important. The rabbis will argue that it's important as far as we recognize that there is one God, because then, yeah, every group will have a different perspective, right? Again, it's all a byproduct of the fact that God is infinite and the fact that we cannot grasp the totality of God. So then we have different groups focusing on different aspects of God. And that was always recognized in Judaism. And you will see, for example, even in the Torah, when the book of Leviticus is talking about the holiday of Sukkot, that there were sacrifices on behalf of all the nations of the world. So we were always always wishing them well, with certain limitations. There were certain limits, certain things that they are deal breakers, but in general, we accept different ways of understanding of God. And you know what? I'm going to leave it here, because I know if I start, I was looking at my slides. If I start another text, we'll go way over time. And I think this is a good point to leave it. And Karen Farkas, you say, we often look, but do not see. We listen, but we do not hear. Yes, it's what the rabbi, I can't remember which rabbi I just read. I think it was Rabbi Kamenetsky, that he's talking about a filter. And sometimes it's good to recognize what is the source of that filter? Is it your ego that is filtering? Sometimes it's not an ego at all. Sometimes the filter comes from real external circumstances, right? Real external circumstances. We should never minimize things that happen to us and the capacity that they have to sever our connection with God. But sometimes, like the case of Pharaoh, comes from ego. If all we try to do in life is to replace God, then how can you connect with God if you are God? You know what I mean? That's the thing. But if the problem with our struggles are external circumstances, we have the opportunity to get inspired by the words of the rabbis, by the Torah, and to uplift our life and to strengthen our relationship with God. Okay? Well, more on this next class. Next class we're going to continue, because remember, this week's Parsha also includes the first 7 plagues, all the way up to hail. And then next week, it's going to be the last 3 and the beginning of the Exodus. So don't miss that one. We're going to be here, God willing, studying all that. So until then, I want to just to thank you, thank you all. I want to say thank you all for coming out, for connecting this afternoon so we could study together. And remember, this class is going to be rebroadcasted tonight at 8 p.m. Central Time. If you missed part of this class, tune in. 8 p.m. The entire class was recorded. It's going to be rebroadcasted at 8 p.m. And please give us the thumbs up if you're on Facebook and YouTube. Always like that. Share it if you want with a friend, with somebody that you feel may need a few words of encouragement. And yeah, you can always share this class. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Please stay safe and hope to see you soon. Bye, everyone.